Wow. Oh! Absolutely fantastic. Gosh, I'm afraid I did do just a little bit of boy racering just then. The MG ZS 180 in the most spectacular colour. This is the colour for this car. Based originally on the Rover 45 that was actually a Rover 400. What a show off of a car. Look at it. It's shouting, look at me. I've got flared wheel arches. Got a skirt along the bottom. I've got gills. I've got a front end that looks really rather angry. And then for it to be finished off in ignition blue, it couldn't get more exciting. Not much more exciting anyway. This car is Carol Vorderman. Started off humble, frumpy looking, ordinary. It's ready to show off. It's got its best gear on, it's got its high heels on, it's got the urge to have everybody look at it, and gosh, it's fantastic. And it's had its arse end boosted up as well. Look at that, sticking out like a South American big bottom as well. It's not the best example of a ZS, to be honest. It's got quite a few little things, but that's not a reflection on what the car actually is. Yeah, it's got a scratch. Yeah, it's got a bit of broken body kit. Yeah, it's got a crack on the bumper. Yeah, it's got another bigger crack on the bumper that's been painted badly. But overall, it just looks really exciting. I parked it in the shop the other day, came out to it and I thought, just from the profile, it's so... You just feel like something wonderful, something amazing is about to happen. Maybe like being married to Carol Vorderman, and even better when you consider what she used to look like. Imagine if you was Carol Vorderman's husband and she used to look like this, and now she looks like this. This is a factory fit body kit, of course. The 11 spoke wheels really do suit it. There's no unpainted bits anywhere. But the boot spoiler, gosh, what do we think of that? From the angle that you're looking at it right now, it does look okay. It looks really purposeful and like it's going to do something exceedingly naughty if you're not careful. It looks like it's been put there to please a certain type of person that probably couldn't really afford it in the first place. It's called the Extreme Spoiler, and it is extremely ugly. I don't like it in the slightest bit. I find it quite embarrassing. I just don't get that at all. It just looks like a cobbled together shelf that's been painted the same colour as the rest of the car to make it look Subaru Impreza. They'd seen the Subaru Impreza in blue with the gold wheels and everything and thought, we'll do that. That's what everyone will like. They'll buy an MG if it looks like a Subaru, won't they? They did a remarkable job of taking the Rover 45 and turning it into this. Much more so than they did with the ZT or the ZR, really. The Rover 45 was basically an old man's car who had some money left out of his pension, wanted something new. The 25 was the old lady's car who does old lady things. And the 75 is basically an old man's car who has forgot to retire. But this one doesn't even look like it's related. I mean, it does, but you've got to know what it is to know what it is. Oh gosh, that sounds like one of those awful phrases that somebody might pick up on and think they're being awfully philosophical. Cut that bit out of the video. The other thing I really don't like is the boot. Because they were trying to pander to, again, the max power generation, who were faffing around with somebody else's well thought out design, they took the number plate from there and bunged it there and called that a facelift. And it's just not good. That is just numb. Before we even got to 1990, Honda had the idea of having a boot release just down there so you can open your boot, which is a good idea. But then without the handle there, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So what do you open this with? The boot spoiler? You could do, but of course, then every time you're opening this, you're putting pressure on the boot and how it's actually attached to it, and eventually it's going to come off. Or by grabbing your fingers under there. That seems like the sensible thing to do if you want to maintain the integrity of the boot spoiler. But what happens when you start doing this and somebody happens to just lean down on the boot spoiler and get your fingers underneath there? That could end up with fewer fingers than what you started with. The boot on the saloon car is very big, which is good because it's full of junk at the moment. I'm afraid I've got to talk about some more things I don't like about this car, and that is the handles. Now these handles you have to take special care with and push against them like that, so you're actually not pulling the thing off, because if you look at this one, that one's already broken. The actual really annoying thing about that isn't that they're feeble, it's that when they were originally designed by Honda and on the earlier cars, they don't break. It's just that they cut a corner, they made them cheaper. And when it comes to something like a door handle, whether it works or not, that's a bit like a bus cutting a corner whilst it's going round a corner full of pedestrians on the corner. And I'm afraid to say I haven't finished. No, I'm afraid I haven't. One of the reasons I got to like Rover in the first place was because of their incredible value for money and build quality. Because they had this reputation that they didn't really deserve, people didn't buy them, and that meant that you had a much nicer car than what you was paying for. Then of course, Rover changing hands from Honda and British Aerospace meant that somebody else or something else or some company else got their dabs on it and started making changes. Excuse the car because I haven't cleaned it, but let's start with this. Horrible carpet. A dashboard which is made of non-microwavable ice cream cartons. I mean, fair enough, we've got the nice boobies in the middle there. Then we have the vents, and look at that. That is typical of what happens because the plastic is so tinny. You can see how much it's bending there, that they simply won't tolerate being used. The buttons, not as good as the old ones, and they did nothing to fix the saggy headlining problem. And by this stage, they would have known about it. They did. They would have known about it. They would have very well known about it, but they chose not to do anything about it because they were trying to save money, not make things better. The seats in the MG are somewhat better than what they are in the Rover 45 because they're quite supportive, although they do suffer with wear because of that bolster sticking out. But they're nowhere as good as the original 45 seats. And nearly all of the quality of the original 400 HHR and the 45 has sadly gone. Even the headlamps, I mean, they may look good when they're polished up, but they don't half fade because the plastic is just not any good. However, what they did do is bung in a slightly more exciting engine. Now, I would have said the T-Series, the 2-litre T-Series would have been better. I mean, it's got 136 horsepower in the first place, it's reliable, it's exceedingly heavy, but it's good on fuel, whereas I know this is awful on fuel. 2.5 litre KV6 engine with a bit of that's kind of homemade there, with approximately 174 brake horsepower. Now actually in today's standards that doesn't even sound like a great deal, does it? It's not like it's a tiny car. I mean, it's not big. Oh, I suppose by today's standards it's not a big car at all. It's small, and it wasn't big to start with. It was average. Now it's small. Where am I going with this? I don't know. The ZS isn't just a Rover 45 in a nice suit. There really is quite a bit more to it than that. I mean, the Rover 45 is a wonderfully accomplished driver's car. You wouldn't know it to look at it, but it is. The ZS is the same thing, but like a hardcore version. The suspension really is quite stiff. The shockers are different, the springs are different, the track's different, the steering rack's different. It's not just a body kit and plastic seats. Although these are actually leather. You can feel everything, you can feel every bit of the road. It's not a car you drive if you want to feel relaxed. The other thing is, they didn't make a Rover 45 with this engine. They did the 2-litre automatic, which, well, I mean, it sounds good and everything, but it doesn't have a great deal of poke. And for a 2-litre, it's not what you would call economical. But this car, we're not expecting it to be economical because it does have a 2.5 litre V6, but has been a bit sort of tuned up ever so slightly, but not over the top. It's not like it's got stupid power. Supposedly the 180 means 174 brake horsepower, which, why don't you call it the 170 then rather than the 180? But no, maybe there must be some reason for that. So it may be jiggly, but gosh, it does have a sense of occasion whilst driving this. As I've said, the Rover's good in the first place, so the steering is good, the gear change is good, the driving position is good, the sense of being happy to be out in the car is all there. It's not just a Rover 45 dressed up for a party, it's more like fancy dress. And Jesus, that actually shifts. And listen to the sound of that. Wow. That's good. I mean, that's really good. I was expecting this to feel pretty much like the ZT190, which I've always found ever so slightly underwhelming. You know, they're quite nippy, but you've got to properly rev them for them to really do anything. But this one's got the torque as well, and that picked up in a rather jolly good fashion indeed. The thing is, this car, although not much smaller than the ZT, is significantly lighter, and so you get the benefit of that power without lugging around a great big clunking piece of iron that's, well, not iron, but you know, steel. The ZT needs more power than 190, and this really does put it to shame with that extra energy that it's got. Although the ZT is a very, very fine handling car, you're really going to struggle to find something that can out-corner one of these. Driving the car gently, it does react in the way that you'd expect it to do. It's not an intimidating amount of power, it's just really rather pokey when you want it to be. Fuel economy, well that's a funny one, isn't it? Because obviously the fuel economy on the KV6 isn't known for being good at all. I mean, it's not too bad if you're driving it really gently on the motorway, but once you get it just knocking about on the streets, it doesn't really want to return much more than 18 miles per gallon in my experience. And the trouble is, when you've got a sound that's as intoxicating as that, it doesn't really help fuel economy either. The way this clings, wow. Oh! Gosh, cling on the corner again. This is possibly the most irresponsible I've ever been in a car, and it's just amazing. Oh, there we go, caught somebody out there. He wasn't expecting me to be carried on going. I'm afraid I did do just a little bit of boy racering just then, but it was just a little bit, and it was safe to do so, and I jolly well enjoyed it as well. I wish this had half a tank of fuel in it, because I could spend all day doing that. That's fantastic. Where this really belongs is going to be over the tops of those hills. It's absolutely fantastic, really. This thing grips like a panicking tick. In conclusion, this is a long way from being a perfect car. It's exceedingly exciting, wonderful to drive, and has so much going for it. It's just the build quality issues MG Rover decided would be a good idea, knowing how well they used to make their cars, just baffles me. There are no major reliability issues with this car or this engine, but couldn't they have just made it feel like it wanted to work as well as just actually working?